you're like in the hallway or from another room, you can get a chair.
I feel like I'm
Martin, I stole your pen.
That's so cool. I don't know. I already have
Yeah, she just did that.
I think Sean just went to the bathroom before the round and came in a prep late and then went to the bathroom.
I'm gonna use the restroom real quick since Martin's doing it. No, Martin's not doing it.
That's my way.
Just my way.
I mean, if you want one of these, if you want this, you can use this instead. I mean, I don't know, I like that pen more than these.
I don't think it's so much
The shittiest thing. Like $5 for like a pack of like 20.
Yeah, you gotta be true.
Oh yeah.
Hard plastics. Just to go get
I mean, I don't know. You can like go with
yeah,
marks.
YouTube's not as bad things. You get shred the end.
Then also, it just like looks gross. Like this is like gnarly. Some people steal it still. Like
You buy it? Label everything.
Recognize the leader of the government.
Because I get the res from someone.
We will wait for a partner.
Not always. Do you have a res?
What?
Do you have a res? We were referring to it as the res.
What?
Do you have a res?
Katie, do we have the rest?
I do. The United States federal government should increase pressure on Russia to renew the Nunn-Lugar Cooperative Threat Reduction Program.
Oh god, we're prep global warming, what are we gonna do? Oh my god, global warming.
Cooperation Threat Reduction Program.
Yep.
Cooperative.
Cooperative Threat Reduction Program.
Okay.
I wasn't exactly.
We're ready,
You got the camera?
Yep.
Are you coming back to win?
We are giving back the land indeed.
All ready? The first is framework you've heard before. Interpretation, both sides are responsible for explaining how the visions will be implemented within existing structures of power and how they would reform those structures to bring about change. Both sides are responsible for explaining how the visions will be implemented within existing structures of power and how they would reform those structures to bring about change. Standards to this is key to evaluating consequences. We isolate two types of consequences: power structures and structures of belief, which influence individual agency, which makes if you do not evaluate both of it, solvency of the alternative becomes possible. There's no way to reconcile how structures of power have changed the way in which we operate, and is branded utopianism, which is impossible to incorporate criticism because we only imagine how the world ought to be, but not how we could get there, and no dirty hands approach it. It becomes complicit in suffering when you do not evaluate solvency, which creates this is key to valuing the lesser of two evils and not being complicit in death and infinite regression. We can't evaluate every prior question of whether we should help blacks, Latinos, or the first people first, and there's no way to resolve the conflict of prioritization. Also, there methodologies named regressive. We only focus on methodology, no way to actually prescribe action, and death that weighs zero versus one forecloses all possibility, and it requires subjective determinations about bad life. And speaking of the other end, it does not mean extinction is inevitable because there are systems that are able to check extinction in the general sense, something true like mutually assured destruction and trade test, but not in specific proximate causes that you have to isolate. And role playing is good. It allows us to take responsibility for the structures of power that do violence against individuals. Inherency, the Nunn-Lugar Agreement is a agreement which has specifies a massive nuclear reduction, and it's responsible for the decommissioning of nuclear weapons, CBW stockpiles, and also the removal of warheads for and delivery vehicles. In 2012, Russia said that it was not going to extend the agreement because of diplomacy issues. The plan text: the United States federal government should threaten to expand nuclear missile defense in Europe on the condition that Russia extends the Cooperative Threat Reduction Agreement. I will get you I'll get you the copy of the minute. A U.S. federal government should threaten to expand NMD in Europe on the condition that Russia extends the Cooperative Threat Reduction Agreement. Nunn-Lugar. They will say yes. The first argument is there's been cooperation on nuclear programs in the past, and one, it was extremely expensive to actually continue to commission this stuff and decrease it, which provides political shielding for people within Russia who want to do the second argument is proven by start the QB issues and purely getting it done. Third argument is that NMD is obviously extremely big threat because it would change the asymmetry of warfare and break the Russian people. The fourth argument is they've said yes on NMD. Of course, this is one of the key cards that was in play. NATO won oil gas pipelines in the 90s. The next argument is advantage one Russian miscalculation unique is there's a high probability of miscalculation. The stats go one to the army of Russia has been on hair trigger alert. There have been several instances in which weather balloons and flocks of birds almost caused them to be launched a nuclear arsenal in Norway. Second argument is Russia has poor maintenance over its nuclear arsenal, demonstrated by 2006, where there were a report that found that many Russians were drinking in silos. Probably not surprising. The third argument is that becoming heightened by increasing Russian nationalism. The is that this is empirically proved by the many people, and this caused a massive increase in the amount of Russia and the amount of NMD. They are saying they were prioritizing modernizing their their nuclear arsenal rather than decreasing their conventional forces, and it's imperial. And they have also they are been dangerous. Let me also see because. Also they were extremely susceptible to that, which is proven in the early 2000s when you found that in Chechnya there was fissile material enhanced non-state actors. The links of plan is able to solve miscalculation. One, it decreases military arsenal. It destroys. It has been responsible for the removal of 7,500 nuclear weapons and 550 ICBMs, 120 bombers, and decreases the likelihood that they're actually going to be used. It will be that even if it doesn't solve all nuclear weapons, it also modernizes the nuclear arsenal. It looks like in a way it's going to prevent the misuse and prevents the misuse of calculations by putting locks on the weapons to say which is what Namdur funds. That kind of use the plan gets Russia to spotlight its weaknesses, which causes them to crack down on internal mismanagement and modernize the early warning systems that would cause miscalculation. The third argument is the plan generates a perception of future reform, which is demonstrated by non-Luger, which kicked off START. START is basically threatened a failure because this was tied to START, and now there's a likelihood there's going to be a collapse of any cooperation whatsoever. And this works within the current the impacts of miscalculation is extremely terrible because it's not checking my mutually assured destruction into it's a war, and it can't deter and you can't assume rational action in this specific instance because they are based off of because the people literally think that death is going to come upon them, which means they think that death is at their doorstep and they have to lose their nuclear arsenals, which means that is the exact reason why they use the nuclear weapons. The second argument is this leads to the risk of nuclear war between Russia and the United States causes extinction because they have 5,000 nuclear weapons. Russia has 2,000 nuclear weapons, causes industrial fires that kick out trade winds and block the sun. Second argument is non-state actor death. This is especially true because Russia's borders are extremely porous, and they made a border many states with non-state actors within the risk the U.S. expansionism if they attack U.S. borders because especially because we would think that they would be coming from Russia because we would pinpoint the location of that nuclear weapon material to Russia. The next advantage is pivot to the east. Uniqueness Russia's destiny was resolved in the Asia pivot. One, they're encouraging they're encouraging the Allied airspace is proven by the flyover of the Kuril Islands. And Japan's second argument is especially bad because we were trying to relocate the Okinawa-based Guam, which because to orient good ties toward Japan right after this is happening right after the Dunluger exit. The third argument is that on Tuesday, right before the State of the Union, Russian Air Force literally sent Tu-95 bombers, which included nuclear weapons over U.S. airspace over Guam. That is an absurd warrant for miscalculation. The fourth argument is Russia's only security threat in allies is the only security threat through allies within the region because of its sophisticated delivery system and ICBMs. 5 is the claim of the claims of demilitarization are a lie. They only agreed to start because it hurts the U.S. more than men actually because they were already going to decommission the weapons that it applies to. And 6, the U.S. cannot afford is already cutting its aircraft expenditures now, and Russia is going to expand them by $720 billion. The links in MP ensures a crackdown when it challenges them any on all their military development because we were able to devastate them in the world of missile defense, which grew more because we have more sophisticated radar system, which allows hugely quick reaction time. It's far more superior than any of their missile defense, which means they literally would not be able to use nuclear weapons. And we have radar systems that would be able to challenge the aircraft, which means all of their technology is useless and undercuts their current military expenditure. Second argument, the plan makes it makes it look like they're challenging our air power is also not feasible. And third argument, it allows it ensures allies resolve of the Asia pivot. The internal link is that deterring Russian aggression is key to without the Asia pivot, it creates a perception of multipolarity in the region because they're literally flying over nuclear weapons over U.S. controlled airspace, which is freaking out China because they think that the United States doesn't have control of the region. There's no hegemony, which one opens up the possibility of them actually gaining ground because it looks like people are already violating our sovereign territory. This is why the PLA is saying that now is the key time to use military to expand our economic aids rather than trade tries to risk a war with the United States because of security agreements with these people also massively increases the risk of miscalculation, and it's especially true because Russia is that's good. Miscalculation, war, multipolarity, trying to think use it as multipolar, which opens up a window and causes this.
And then nukes.
Are you saying multipolarity is bad?
Yeah.
And you're saying China's perception of multipolarity specifically is bad.
No other questions?
You can't disassemble the table after the speech.
Yeah, no, I don't ever disassemble it until the end. So Sean can use it.
Thank you. We have partners.
Reassemble it before this.
That way I can steal more prep.
Steal
and we can
infinite
get
prep.
yelled at.
No, you have to do it more.
The order is 1, 2. You want that, Megan? 3, and then what is in order?
Need solvency? Yeah,
Oh yeah, we'll put a solvency.
Is one of them a cake? That's okay, that's what she's a baby. I would like to blow.
You should have extra pages just in case.
Okay, cool. I hate trees.
Can't share arguments out of round, you certainly can't share them in a round. Right? You'd start prepping that, and you'd ignore your disad and start prepping against the cake. Because
Yeah,
obviously,
right.
Oh god, yes.
The last
Need
one.
more, I want.
I decided not to blow.
Everybody ready? Unique distorts arguments of Russian relations are running the status quo. Russian backs run sanctions against the with the UN 3 times, and they were critical of North Korea and Obama's 3 appointments, and Jackson Vatican basing in Afghanistan and starting APAC all prove that Russia is back in the United States in the status quo, and Putin was in favor of Obama, and because of common IMF plans, and it's on the break right now because of Syrian relations. Russia has vetoed the UN Security Council resolution in Syria 3 times. The second argument is that Russia is not aligned with Iran in the status quo. Medvedev stop sales of tanks, armored vehicles, larger artillery systems, warplanes, ships, and missiles. The sanctions on Iran will hurt the economic investments in oil and gas, and there is no conflict right now. Iran can't close the Strait of Hormuz because they fear U.S. aircraft carriers. The least of the plane pressures Russia, which empirically causes backlash, proven in 2012 in Syria, which led to non-cooperation, and pressure on Iran, and pressure in 2012 on Belarus, and the blame pushes Russian relations too far, procedures U.S. moving in to Cold War strategies, and this sparks nationalism, creates backlash, which causes the U.S. crack down this. The impact is that it turns the case. It causes Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz because there's no longer this incentive for Russia to sell weapons like the S-400s and S-500s, which means that Iran would be capable of attacking aircraft carriers. It's causes oil shocks when they shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which we think is the only thing that's stopping them from doing that right now is their inability to combat U.S. military in the area. 33% of oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The barrel prices would increase $500 per day in a world where the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, which means that food price spikes enormously. 1% increase in oil prices causes 0.9% increase in crop prices. This means that individuals survive on less than $1 a day would die of starvation. This is 2 billion people. This is incredibly dehumanizing. Die of starvation because your stomach literally eats itself from the inside out. Also, we have an economy launch where consumer confidence gets tanked because production costs get passed on to consumers. Means that as transportation costs increase, businesses stop investing in production of goods because goods become too expensive to create and transport. This internally links our ability to solve advantage indicators too, because there's no ability for us to solve war scenarios in a world where we have to focus domestically on our internal economy. This also causes resource wars, makes conflict inevitable as we go to fight over resources. That we no longer can import. The United States federal government should offer to repeal the Magnitsky Act on the condition that Russia restores its participation in the Nunn-Lugar Act. Again, the USFG should offer to repeal the Magnitsky Act on the condition that Russia restores its participation in the Nunn-Lugar Act. Is your copy solvency? First, that Russia says yes, the Magnitsky Act is a huge single point in Russian relations. It's seen its move just as we seem to move beyond Jackson banning they put sanctions on his hand. We had an adoption ban in response to our action on the Magnitsky Act. Magnitsky Act is bad for Russia, particularly because it creates uncertainty in the market because Magnitsky Act targets individuals and it increases the ability of banks to be predictive. Businesses, there's a lot of confusion in banks and businesses. They don't know what sort of trading they can do with the U.S. and what sort of business involvement they can have with the U.S. This causes fear to spread to the EU, which leads to pressure, which has led to pressure against Putin and the status quo, who is trying to look strong on businesses right now. Putin is seeking to put funds on international bank accounts right now. This is problematic, especially because capital flight accounted for 46% decline in the GDP in Russia internally last year, and the Magnitsky Act makes the economy look like a bad investment, which means that Russian businesses don't invest domestically, and they leave. Advantage one. Actually, some of them.
Do you want the last one? Do you have time?
I will skip that. Advantage one. First argument is that case solvency is probabilistic at best, and B first is that nobody will believe that it's effectively the case that there is a very low probability that it will happen to towards the next sector of political is that when the policy is truly trying to die, then it causes the weapons use anyway to turn fails because you don't know if it's 10% or 100% effective. This is especially true if you get any game on the survival instincts internally that you get on Advantage 1. Either you don't solve Advantage 1 or your scenario isn't true and Russia doesn't care about it. They didn't care about it last time. The Advantage 1 first argument theft is inevitable. There are approximately easier to access missile materials in DRC, Pakistan, and India, less guarded, and literally just padlocks on the fence indicate there's always going to be some sort of theft in the status quo. You're incapable of solving this. Also, tech and education solve. No tech and education mean that they wouldn't be able to launch it anyway, and no use because the U.S. would find them and join them, and nuclear war doesn't cause extinction, intervening actors, and domestic economic unpredictability and economic ties internationally check and treaties check and would be and more conflict would be intercepted by the U.S. And missiles would be intercepted by the U.S. even without the 1AC or the 1AC, and technology is insufficient to solve in the future, and security agreements check, and starts assaults all other scenarios. U.S. and Russian nuclear cooperation is committed to making arms cuts, which intuitively means that they get rid of all their vulnerabilities or indefensible sites, and info sharing means that U.S. and Russia can prevent theft, and no uniqueness for theft right now. No terrorist groups can reconstitute, and the status quo. The U.S. has succeeded in diffusing terrorist influence and rebel groups, and pro-democratic movements means that the attention is fractured, and Russia can't afford to disarm the weapons of their own. Therefore, they just announced on Wednesday that after they said that they would not extend the non-Luger Act, they have the resources to stand alone their own. This would cause they would continue to decommission things in order to guarantee Russian security for to affirm self-sufficiency. This takes out 100% of their effort. Luger Act not key. Securitizing Russian nuclear stockpiles. They would not divulge military secrets for no reason, and this shows huge Russian relations in fine advantage too. First argument is to turn the U.S. hegemony causes us to roll over other countries in an attempt to make them democracies. We continually roll. All the democracies don't typically roll with each other. Democracies do go to war with with countries that are not democracies in order to bring them into the world of democracy. Means that so becomes more likely in the world of U.S. hegemony. Only in the world of unipolarity are we capable of solving this fact by understanding that there are multiplistic views through which we can better understand international relations. Second argument is that the U.S. pressure, U.S. pressure on China prevents China from going into Taiwan. This specifically is necessary within the region not only to make change, not only because it's very probabilistic that China will go to Taiwan as an extent, inevitably it's an existential national identity conquest. This means that you're this is internally turned to and advantage to. Also, the Asian pivot right now solves also the Asian pivot in the status quo solves your advantage. Also, multipolarity is good. This is necessary, especially for China or cooperate.
Turn A.
What?
Why the China?
Oh, where's that?
Okay, it's right there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
This is on the solve page.
Okay. Okay, also, multipolarity is good. It's necessary to solve it for China on climate change technology, and it's necessary to solve the internal link of war because we can have better economic relations. Next argument is isolating Russia and Poland's Putin because it creates a visible opposition, fortifying the U.S. when the U.S. has asked them to stop supporting around Syria. They simply take it as an opportunity to increase sales for the United States, and Medvedev is achieving multiple things today, but can only go left when he is pressured through back channels because it isn't perceived as a challenge for Putin's domestic or international relations influence. Plan changes this because it isolates Medvedev and pushes Putin to the forefront because Putin will be seen as an opportunistic to increase personal negotiation stature and clout with the U.S. The plan is not expecting the U.S. will. The U.S. has been consulting Medvedev in traction negotiations, but does not signal any meaningful action on the non-nuclear proliferation in the status quo. And the impact is that it turns the case because it involves Russia and it pushes Medvedev off the issue, even if Russia says yes. It will still turn the case because method of leadership on the issue is domestically necessary to ensuring that it gets enforced. Next is U.S.-Russia tensions are escalating. The Tax Magnitsky Act and Namibia and Syria. No, you don't want that? Okay. I have 20 seconds.
Wow,
Do
okay.
you want me to read a couple of those links?
Yeah, just read the link and the term.
Okay. Also,
This is on the framework page.
Also, on framework, it's for reality and nuclear disengagement and dominant discourse limits our ability to pressure nuclear establishments to colonize the debilitation of nuclear weapons. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where we act preemptively against Russia makes nuclear war inevitable.
Wow. Ask a couple of questions. Can you get that argument? Can I get that argument again?
It's just a securitization turn. You make it inevitable it's very simple.
What was the thesis of the last DISAB thing you
The
read?
last step is a case turn. It says that right now we're capable of negotiating with Medvedev, but you make
What-
this not happen.
What was the warrant for that?
That's correct.
For why we're negotiating with
We're
Medvedev?
negotiating with them right now. Track to diplomacy. If we're able to talk with Russia behind closed doors, and Medvedev is capable of solving those relationships, he's more of a soft liner than Putin is. But as soon as the United States makes this into a big
Gotcha,
international issue, then it trades off. Yeah, I have the total number as well. Alright, I'll log it. And I'll
The order is going to be that framework thingy I got rid of at the end.
Is that a little bit louder? I can hear you.
Yeah, the order is going to be that framework thing that was read, the solvency, advantage 1, advantage 2, then, I thought I called it Russia, then counter plan, then I'm pretty sure that was it, right? Wow, 2 sheets of paper.
2 whole sheets of paper.
There were going to be 3 sheets of return.
Got it.
Advantage 1, advantage 2. 1 sec.
I kind of floated on random sheets of paper. I'll just flag the arguments, I hope.
Is counterplan before Russia?
Counterplan is, yeah, I'll put it before
Downplan is
Russia.
on bottom.
I'll put counterplan before Russia. It's probably quicker anyway. Ready?
So one.
Synchronization inevitable, so you don't have to means that you can solve those synchronization good for things like mad, go into the solvency page, you can full mode, have clarity good. All of your arguments are one line flipped out, which means to give huge way for PMR if the ammo goes for use it to keep context arguments won't have clarity channel necessary lash outs. That's your own Taiwan arguments. The United States hegemony unit clarity is absolutely key for checking. That's why the pivot to the east is necessary is absolutely key. Absolutely key. You say who can only go left? Xi Jinping's actually new president. He's extreme leftist. He has the tendency to go to the right. If he perceives the pivot to the east, is not credible. You say that negotiations have now number one is Medvedev never had any kind of power. He always just transmits this information to Vladimir, which means there's no place for him to actually get kind of thing done. Also, Putin is additionally Putin has to go nationalist, which means he's going to veto any kind of soft line negotiation, soft line. He has to veto any kind of soft line compromise because he has to placate the nationalists in the world where he's facing a lot of democratic opposition. Means he has to consolidate power next miscalculation extent to the entire advantage. The first argument you say is that there's low deterrence missile defense. Our first argument is it's empirically effective. We were able to in tests we were able to shoot down several missiles that were used by that were the same model that were used by Russia. Additionally, cross-pollen all of our arguments why the perception this alone is able to deter Russia. You say it becomes a trial or die. Our argument here is it's not a trial or die if Russia thinks it's not going to succeed because they will not risk the political suicide to launch nuclear weapons, which means only in a world where there's miscalculation, only in the world where there's nuclear bombs going off, would Russia actually launch also miscalculations. It would check miscalculation overcomes all of your econ-ties treaty-ties checks argument. Treaty-ties checks argument always you don't contextualize within the context of Russian or Chinese relations means you should be highly skeptical. You say started to resolve. It's not obviously it's not solve loose nukes. Also, we identify specifically the technology and the dead cam trigger and hair trigger alert is the problem for this. Starts nothing to do that, especially when non-Luger was non-Luger actually killed Star, which means Star alone is not able to solve. You say that what is that argument? Oh yeah, you say they should not keep expression one that vote secret. We provide them with technology. Also, cross-player empirics argument says we were able to cooperate with them in the past. What's the turn argument in Russia? No extinction larger. Argument is it?
Some of those solvency arguments,
They also they make a very validity about how this angers Russia. Does not matter in a world we can see say yes we'll securitize all of the Russia we'll be able to securitize all the Russian nuclear weapons. You say that India is much easier to steal, but much easier to steal, but there's cooperation happening with India and such. Also they're much farther within the border, which makes it harder for the non-state actors to get access to those. Harder for the non-state actors to get access to those. Also, the places where the nuclear materials are actually stored is very secure. It's only the missiles that are there. Also, you say there's no technology or education. Our argument is that in a world they can steal the fissile material. They can make dirty bombs and other nasty things.
They say extinction doesn't lead to nuclear war.
They say nuclear war does not use extinction. Across all of our trade winds are arguments. Intervening actors are not able to solve because it causes everyone to launch nuclear weapons.
Intercepted by current tech.
They say it's intercepted by current tech, not in a world where multiple missiles go off, only in a world where there's assurance can we actually solve through interception. Anything else?
And then they say Russia didn't care last time, disproven by our NATO warrant.
Also, you say Russia didn't care last time. We have arguments why this is key, especially because he has to placate the nationalists. Pivot to the east, extend our entire argument about why pivot to the east is key. We need to maintain. You say hegemony causes to roll over other democracies. No, you don't have any kind of proximate causes that lead to the same kind of things as extinction, which means in a world where China becomes belligerent, that's always going to outweigh your rolling over other democracy argument. It's not even go to extinction. You say unipolarity is good. That is literally our argument that Russia is testing our unipolarity in the status quo. The only way that we can maintain the unipolarity is by slapping the ban. You say that U.S. pressure. You say the U.S. pressure is keeping Taiwan as a matter of national identity. Obviously, that is why we have to maintain credibility. You say Asia pivots to the solving. No, it's not solving because Russia is flying over Japanese airspace. Only the plane can solve.
They say it's key to solve climate change.
Oh god, that's on the solvency page. You say it's key to solve climate change. No, in a world where China diverts all of their funds into PLA, obviously not going to happen. They're going to take funding away from climate change. Anything else? Yeah. Okay, god, that was confusing. I will see. All right, counterplan. First argument permutation will solve any kind of net benefit, solves all of Magnitsky's. Magnitsky also solves their solvency deficit. No one cares about Magnitsky. Russia specifically said it means nothing. Also, all of the fallouts that happened were political posturing. Putin specifically said it doesn't actually matter. He only did it to placate the nationalists. Additionally, we've done things like this before. Russia did not actually care. Does not implicate any of their business interests. Russia cares more about Putin. Cares more about the business interests. Nationalists means that he does not care about whether or not the United States calls him out for being bad on human rights. Oh God, that never happened before.
The State Department could literally do the mandates of Magnitsky before it was passed.
Yeah. Also, the State Department literally did the mandates of Magnitsky before it was passed. Go on to the Russia. First argument permutation shield the link to this side because it solves Magnitsky. Also, things like Serbia and Georgia is creating massive tension between the United States. Also, drawdown in Afghanistan is putting more power in the hands of Russia. Russia. Also, there's conflicts happening over things like Iran. Even if Russia is cooperating right now, they watered down several sanctions. Also, Russia is extremely upset over the intervention in Libya. They're still kind of butthurt about it. Also, you see Afghanistan, but geopolitics and economic interest checks back whether or not Russia backlashes on things like Afghanistan, Jackson, Vatican, not invitation of whether or not the United States they have their body budget to the United States. Also, you say Syria, but Russia recently drew back from Syria, which means Syria is no longer a key issue for foreign policy within the no longer key policy. Also, you say but Russia drew back from Iran recently as well. China became their number one buyer of crude oil and became number one provider of refinery technology. Means that Russia literally does not care. You say that it causes backlash, zero risk of backlash against the United States. Putin especially the support of the business interests and nationalist means that he cannot afford to look like he is going to jeopardize Russian business interests in order to backlash against the United States. Also, we are winning arguments that says that they're going to say yes, which means they're not actually going to backlash. You say empirically done so in things like Belarus, but it's not. You say they've probably done so in places like Belarus, but there's no cooperation happening in Belarus. We have empirics as to why Russia is not as pissed off by non-nuclear, especially when we're just giving them a bunch of technology launch the internal link. First, US Edge is able to check all of them. They have S-4000 now. We have S-4000 now. They're not launching. They're not closing the Strait of Hormuz. Fifth, rock will block the shit out of them. They're not going to actually succeed in any kind of attack against our fleet. Also, that's not Iranian strategists focus on asymmetrical warfare, which means they're not going to engage in symmetrical warfare against the United States. That's why they're building things like nuclear weapons. Also, we have absolute cyber security. We have cyber hedge maneuver over them. That's why we're Stuxnet destroy the shit out of all of the reactors, and why Dooku caused a missile to blow up while all of their scientists are looking at it, which probably means there's no impact. Also, OPEC are able to offset by using the Suez Canal. I think places like Canada specifically agreed when we were putting sanctions on Iran that they were wanting to offset. Also, sanctions stopped Iranian oil from reaching Western markets, which means that all of these impacts should have happened right now. World markets and that's we're able to check for this. Also, in a world where oil prices goes up, the United States is going to allow the exportation of natural gas, which is almost free right now, which means there's no impact to energy markets.
Madchek's resource was.
And Madchek's resource was, miscalculation. Nationalism is only internal link.
What is the thesis of the East? I don't understand. I think it's like Russia focusing on the shift away from towards China or away from China.
Yeah,
I don't know.
they won't clear that.
The odds are they're miscalculated. There's just so much key shit. It's like everything.
It's when you're right.
Oh yeah.
In which order shall we use it?
I shall use you in the order of the I will find those specifically, but I am going to go through in the order of no, I'm not. I'm going to start with solvency, the say yes argument, and then the turn should read at the bottom that I will call turn A. That is how you first game and then it's going to be advantage 1. Advantage 2. After that.
Okay, so it's going to be solvency debate, then what turn A is which one?
Turn A is
They tried 2 negotiations.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the one you
Which is the last one you read. And then after the last turn that you read, that is turn A, you're going to advantage 1 and then 2.
And then the character
Oh, wait, so okay.
Do you speak again?
0 speaks.
I wish to speak again later.
I'll speak for Mark.
That's nice for you. Okay, well, is everyone good now? Personal moment, but then we'll begin.
Okay.
I think
Timer start?
Oh.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm gonna pause it. I started the timer, and I now have 7:39 left. Is everyone okay with this? Super. It's gonna be the same order. Sorry, I thought that was clear. It was not.
7:39.
7:39 left. As is not the case today, your disadvantage is that Russia doesn't have the economic budget, doesn't have the economic capacity to dismantle the weapons on their own.
They can afford to dismantle all the weapons on their own. It means the 1AC is absolutely
They
unnecessary.
can't afford to dismantle all the weapons on their own because the 1AC and the 1DC does absolutely nothing. Yes. Katie, are they going to count now? No, I'm not. Okay, no, sorry.
Will you extensively argue?
No, at least it's the right move. Okay, first, go on to turn A. Or like, sorry. You have been seeing the internal language system that we're capable of solving the problems for us that exist in successful methods working with the United States, attracting diplomacy that is happening behind closed doors, and they are capable of solving negotiations that are happening right now. This is solving the tactic of what you see, but doesn't provide the method of backlash. But doesn't provide Putin, but doesn't allow for the world of Putin backlash. The link. The plan is capable of, the method is capable of influencing Putin right now because no one knows that he's doing it. The plan forces Putin into a position where he has to look nationalist in order to be able to manipulate his party, and in order to be able to increase international posturing. This means that he loses the ability, to communicate with him. This is uniquely key because it means that it means that traction diplomacy fails in the world such quo, means that no cooperation with the United States and Russia is possible. In addition, it means their long-term solvency because you can't ensure that you should diplomacy is enforced. Okay, I'm going to have one. So you can write me some overview on this. First, I need to say is permutation do both, so listen to that benefit. And the net benefit you say is permutation that people shield link. This is the true world with any pressure on Russia. Putin thinks that Putin thinks that he's not capable. Means that Putin's empirically going backlash. Putin empirical solve certain this in the Jackson Ban legislation. Well, the tip attack legislation shows that the United States is pressure the Washington against Russia has tip attack retaliation, which means that there would be something to target the United States. This goes can see that this was the ability that Russia doesn't care about these issues, but their empirical evidence in the last 2 weeks has been able to prove so they have been able to false. In addition, I want to argue that the Russian people will try to look strong on this comment. This is the kind of capable of solving entirely on this capable of shielding all the office they have coming off of this. The next thing you say is they're capable of solving for the Magnitsky Act. This is true. We're that only the world when I see is Russian people to cooperate. Is Russia capable of cooperating with the United States? Which means that we're the only way to solve for any percent for the one I see. Washington versus did that means you vote negative. And actually, it makes people cooperate. Even if that's true, it still means that the Putin has to play a nationalist, which means that backlash is inevitable. That. You're saying the conflict's happening now. Russia is upset over Libya and Syria. However, we're going to be more specific analysis as to what specifically is happening. We say that Russia is not in the United States right now because the world of the status quo, the world of the status quo, the United States is simply doing that, talking and trying to do diplomatic pressure on Syria and Iran. They're not taking any military action. This is pleasing Russia, and Russia is very happy about this. In addition, Russia had the APEC argument, which shows that this was happening with so much of the economic cooperation between the United States and Russia had within the world status quo, which means relations are increasing. In addition, Russia is using federal bomb within the world right now, which means he has to bring the backlash in the world status quo. The argument that Russia currently is not aligned with the Iran status quo, that they're not people close to straight for moves because they stop the weapon sales. In addition, they stop the weapon sales because they stop the weapon sales to be able to comply with the sanctions orders. So we need something more specific on this question when we leave off the debate. First thing when they say the economy solves backlash, this isn't true. Our argument that this is very specific says Russia is engaged in tip-tap retaliation and that they need to be able to look strong in the international arena in order to get investors to come into their country, they need to be able to look strong in the international arena in order to be able to get investments, in order to be able to have the power to negotiate with other countries over economic issues. This means that the world with which Putin they get back to the United States and feels like he's looking bad because they're being pressured into doing something. They backlash and have that backlash and have economic motivation to have an advantage over the United States, which is why they end up selling missiles to Russia. You said Russia just got back from Syria and Russia got back from Iran. Classified from above. Unique answers this. You said there was a backlash. Classified Putin argument, the tip-attack retaliation. Putin needs to repeal the nationalists within his party. Next argument. You say there was a backlash because supporting business interests. Look, in a world in which the United States looks like it's pressuring Russia, this is perceived as Russia looking weak on issues, which means they're not capable of getting this type of international investment, and it means that Russia is capable of negotiating for themselves in the international spectrum for the world of the future. They think that the United States is going to take advantage of this relationship and simply pressure them into economic policies that are not economically viable for them because they want to be economically viable for them, which will collapse their economy. This means that Russia has a tip-attack retaliation, which causes them to take a hit on the United States economy, which is the trade for moves closing. Anti-poem? You said there was backlash. Above. You said that they said yes. They would, no. Putin is mad. Press button above. You said internally, the United States is capable of solving. U.S. has to solve the world money. See, you see the list say Russia and Russia. This right now. There's no propensity for international actors to see. Russia selling the S-300s to Iran. To Iran, having the sale. All this weapons simply means that Iran capable of closing the street from within the region. This would increase oil prices, which causes an increase in instability within the region, such as what I see, because it increases the potential for individual actors for individual actors to engage in conflict because of bad economic situation. In addition, I want to classify the second argument that this would decrease United States production costs, that this would increase the United States production costs in the U.S. economy, which leads to a situation in terms of advantage 1 and advantage 2, because the United States economy collapses. We're not capable of negotiating. We're not capable of negotiating. Use it in engage in symmetrical relationships. Look, they would classify they're selling missiles to Iran, not asymmetrical. Use it has ever had hedge of them. In a world in which the United States economy collapses, the United States isn't capable of accessing this type of military power because the United States is currently dependent on the Iranian oil. And in addition, you can see the perception link, which says that even the perception of decrease in oil costs because the fact this happened so often in the past means that the serious link decrease in consumer confidence because of the precarious conditions of the United States economy. This would lead to a decline. Case. What case? Overview on case. New case, please. No, overview on case. Oh, the top case. First thing is a threat to level. There are nuclear materials in DRC, India, Pakistan that are easy to access. You can effectively drop this argument to say that their protections exist. Protections are full proof indicate that there's only risk people capable of stealing them. And circumventing what I see. In addition, intervening actors check your impact before it goes terminal. And start means that status quo is solving your act. And cooperation with China is key to U.S. and China economy, which gives trade ties and solves the internal link to war. I don't understand what they can go for. Oil prices don't increase the export of natural gas because currently depend on the economy. In addition, the economy because individual gas prices as well as home prices are predicated off of oil prices within cars. It means consumer confidence still declines, which contributes internally to the economy as per our scenario. Russia thinks that they're capable, if the United States economy collapses, that they're capable, that they're capable of influencing in other areas, expanding in other areas. Means that there's only risk people switch investment to them, which is why they must plan. Or on the plan.
What was the last argument?
It's not process. Martin. Okay. The order is going to be the counterplan and dissent. I want I mean, it's going to be these solvency arguments and then just, I mean, like really it's just impact calculus in comparison. So wherever you want to put that. Okay. Risk of a dissent independently outweighs the offense that you are capable of accessing coming off of the 1AC. I think that you are conceding several arguments on the dissent which would indicate that it would independently outweigh your app. Also, you're conceding several defensive arguments on your app that become terminal defense, especially in worlds where you're incapable of compensating for the status quo of your app. Not a coherent response to this. Look, Russia came out the Wednesday after they said they would not extend the Nunn-Lugar Act. They said they have the resources to dismantle all of their nuclear weapons on their own, and they would continue to decommission these things in order to guarantee Russian security and a firm self-sufficiency. Your plan only creates a risk that you jack Russia's swag and that you make it impossible for Russia to empower themselves to be able to make these sorts of calculative, good political decisions in the future. When they can afford to make the decision on their own, and they choose to make the decision on their own, there's only a risk that the affirmative saying that Russia has to do it under a certain condition creates a situation in which Russia will not do it, which means the affirmative is not a good idea. You can see that argument. I don't know why you do that. Some might say you are trying to give us a serious spell. Additionally, there also theft is inevitable. You can see arguments that say that nuclear materials in the DRC and India and Pakistan are all easy to access. I mean, look, there are like literally padlocks on chain link fences with nuclear materials sitting inside gates in places that has literally just been left behind. This means that theft is always inevitable. Also, intervening actors will check your impact before it goes terminal. That argument goes conceded means that there's not an impact that you have to weigh in the PMR against the impact of the dissent. We say that resource war is not checked by intervening actors because it is a survival-based mentality. Means that mutually assured destruction doesn't check the dissent impact. However, intervening actors are capable of solving your impact before it reaches the terminal state because any instance of miscalculation causes the U.S. to freak out and draw attention to this. Additionally, START means that the status quo is also solving your app in cooperation with China, and also on advantage 2, cooperation with China is key to the U.S. and China's economy, which gives us the trade ties that solve the internal links of war. This means that the 1AC is not necessary, and in fact, the 1AC is only more probabilistic in creating one. Counterplay. Dissent to the permutation becomes the Iran strikes on the dissent. If there's a 1% risk that we win, dissent that it outweighs any residual benefit of incorporating your 1AC. Your 1AC does not shield the link to the dissent. It magnifies the link to the dissent because it is still, because the U.S. isn't doing anything, because the U.S. doing something, the U.S. pressuring Russia on something that they have now, that they do not want, which is something that you can see on the solvency sheet, as well as doing something that they do want, means that there's still a higher perception of doing something that you don't want. If someone gives you a compliment and also gives you criticism, you are much more likely to remember the criticism. Also, there is no point to do your wrath. There is only a risk that it causes Russia to backlash because the U.S. is pressuring them on a superfluous policy. Deterrence is not real. You are conceding arguments that say that if there's a 10% chance and a 100% chance, if you get any game on advantage 1, that a survival instinct exists. If you have an advantage 1 scenario, then it means that deterrence isn't real. Because we will still, because Russia will still have a survival mentality, which means that they will still fire at the missile shield. Also, dissent itself. 1% risk of a dissent means that the econ collapse turns advantage 1 into advantage 2. Miscalculation becomes inevitable in a world of economic instability. It also becomes much more likely that fearful policymaking creates an instance where miscalculation becomes probable. Also, we think that we will, which means that we are controlling much more predictively to how fearful policymaking creates instances where your scenarios are possible. Also, resource wars is a much larger conflict which independently outweighs both scenarios of advantage 1 and advantage 2, and no money for an Asian pivot means we solve the internal links of disadvantage.
Mia, what was the argument you made at the end? If you remember the last argument? Do you remember?
I couldn't blow my own speech.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I really wish I was that talented.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that.
I believe that the last argument that Megan made was that start argument, or cooperation with China argument.
What's that? Cooperation with China solves for.
Solves the economy because it gives trade ties, which means that there's not a reason to go to war with China.
Oh.
Okay. The order
Table strikes.
is going to be solvency debate.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Okay. The order is going to be the solvency debate. And the one argument there. Then it's going to be the A turn. And it's going to be, when I can find it, advantage 1, advantage 2, counterclaim.
Are you going to trip during your speech?
Martin actually doesn't understand, so he speaks. You're a little secret.
Gotta take off the shirt.
Right, Nigel.
For us too. Oh, we already did.
Okay, are we all ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
The overview is simple. You have conceded that Iran's strategy is not focusing on the Strait of Hormuz and would never include striking the Strait of Hormuz, which means there was no perception argument to your business confidence. Second, you have conceded that they already have A400s now, which is the weapon that you isolate, which means your internal link is empirically denied. When you concede that there was no offense on the disadvantage, only a risk of arguments on the counterplan, now go to solvency. Your sovereignty debate is relevant, and it's not a question of whether they are able to afford to dismantle the weapons in the future. That is not relevant to the question of solvency advantage to. It's a question of whether we send a signal, and whether that signal shows that we are actually going to back up our claims, and we are going to try them to get back to things like non-lucre. That is a signal that is not captured by the counterland because it is not in the context of military hardware. I will explain that at the link level advantage too, but this argument is totally relevant. Second, Sean actually does answer it. You've conceded the analysis that they would not be dismantling non-lucre because they were trying to focus on conventional weaponry, and non-lucre would force them to continue to increase their modernized nuclear arsenal, which means this rhetoric is a lie. That is the PMC argument that you have conceded that Sean extends. Now go to the question of Medvedev. L-O-fucking-L. Your warrant is Medvedev's is behind closed doors. No one knows it, but you should vote on this argument. Are you serious? Medvedev has been controlled by Putin from the very beginning. That is why Putin was literally able to tell him, get out of the presidency, let me come in, which means Putin is the one who's controlling the dialogue, and there's not going to be dialogue that solves the status quo, and this is not an argument cross-play the solvency of multipolarity in Russia, or a reason why it would solve that conflict of Chinese emboldenment means this says no, this gives you nothing, and conceded Putin has already had to go nationalist. This is why he backlashed on the question of Beninsky, which shows that there is no uniqueness for this argument. Now, go to the multipolarity arguments. You do not extend any of these terms, conceded all of the defense. It says that you should not be voting on the question of multipolarity versus unipolarity because things would be able to check back, and the terms would be able to check. Now the question of terrorism, I'm just kicking it. There is no offense here. It doesn't matter if they're alt causes, whatever. Advantage 2. Overview of the question of impact deviance. You've conceded the framework argument that says mutually that miscalculation is able to prevent any sort of trade ties from actually being able to check back. You just extend that kind of defense. It is not actually defense when there are bombs and there is not intervening actors. When there were bombs that are going overhead and about to strike you, the only choice that you have is to use nuclear weapons. Second, we are extending your own impact, which says that in a world of Chinese emboldenment, they go towards Taiwan, which causes nuclear weapons and causes extinction. You do not get to read impact deviance to your own scenario, which means that you do not cross-apply that defense to the Chinese emboldenment. The question of Taiwan, you conceded. Your own analysis is that nationalists want to get into that region, and the only way in which they do so is in a world in which deterrence does not exist via the thesis of advantage, which means we have clean access to that question and miscalculation. Now go to link to scenario. Extend all of the links that are extremely contextualized to the PMC. It says that the only way in which we reassure people that there is a power within our military-industrial complex and that we are establishing a presence within the region of and preventing the Russian check is in a world in which we do NMD because NMD is fucking awesome. You try to extend that it's not going to work, and conceded empirical analysis that says it does work and that it would freak everyone out because it would create asymmetrical balancing over other people. We are not saying that we are going to establish NMD, but the threat of NMD causes the advantage to be solved because it secures our interest and makes us look unipolar. Now go to the counterplan. Counterplan Prometheus shielded link and takes out the entire of the disadvantage. You're responsible for this links into your own counterplan. You literally say any sort of pressure would cause a tit for tat retaliation, and you do not get any more specific than fucking that, which means it links into your counterplan because you literally pressure them to get ready to put back the non-lucre agreement, which is the same, which is a form of pressure. There is no link to differentiation that you establish in your negative block means that Perm shields 100% a link, but also Beninsky means nothing. You say it's key to business interest. Conceded that the State Department could have done this, which means it did not create business speculation in the past, and this is empirically not. It means nothing. Conceded the arguments that this was a move to placate nationalists, that Putin would not say yes, but you conceded the analysis that says non-lucre is seen as critical, and non-lucre is seen as critical, which means this would not be able to overcome that because they want to modernize and expand their nuclear arsenal, which means that Beninsky is not going to be sufficient to overcome this, and it does not send a signal. They do not even try to claim solvency to advantage to. I've already explained why that is the case. That is the nuclear war scenario we were going for. Now, the question of Iran, I've already extended the internal link defense, which means you have no impact in this scenario, but also we would argue we have far faster time because it would take an extremely long time for the weapons to actually get to production. More importantly, for economic collapse to actually proliferate throughout the global economy would take months, if not years. However, we are winning arguments that there are literally flyovers right now, which means any day is a reason to vote for affirmative on the risk of trying in extinction when extinction is inevitable, only a risk of affirmative offense. And second, that Taiwan is getting extremely emboldened right now because of in the fucking State of the Union address, Russia flew nuclear bombers over Guam means we have a faster time frame. I extended the internal link defense. There is no answer to this. There is no perception of oil shocks. We have already done this. And hedge checks. It also checks perception because cybersecurity, beyond other things, would be able to slap them down. There's no internal link. You got to answer defense.
God!
We walk out and let the judges decide, and then come back and hear what they decided.
Just a bit of a tangled up. We decided to want to eat them, so we ripped them like wet. Ripped them up and then threw them away in the outside trash can and the outside recycling bin.
I think that was helpful. Wow, this is, I can't get out of here. But does not fit through that tiny little space.